Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at Ironhack, teach at IE Business School University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey, Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. We have with us today Gianni today. But Gianni, before we take off, are you prepared to engage?
Yes, of course. Yes, I am, Rob. Thank you to invite me, and hi, everyone.
So we have Gianni Minetti with us today. He is 35, originally from Tuscany in Italy, but has lived in Milan for work for many years. Since he was a child, he has been a big fan of video games, especially RPGs or role-playing games, Final Fantasy Saga, Assassin's Creed Saga, Kingdom Hearts Saga, to give a few examples. And he has always been curious as a person and willing to always to study and learn new things. And he has been fortunate enough to bring these two passions into a professional career, because in the company he works for and manages, he is mainly involved in developing projects that involve the application of gamification in education. So, Gianni, I don't know if we're missing anything from that intro.
No, exactly. You describe very, very well my life.
Amazing. So, Gianni, what does a regular day look like? What does a regular week, or however you want to take this? We want to sort of be in your shoes and be there with you. We want to see how your life goes nowadays.
Well, as you correctly said, I'm a manager of a training company that is, let's say, a part of a bigger consulting group. So basically, my typical day follows the style of the consulting world. I'm a morning person, so I devote the first hour of the day reading the front pages of our new online newspaper. And I know that it sounds quite boring, but actually among these news are not only economic news or market trends, but I read a lot of gaming news and try to follow and read something about the famous people who inspire me the most, such, for example, Elon Musk for his brilliance and his geniality, or Warren Buffett for his calm approach and ability to define strategy with which he makes every business-related choice. So this is the first hour of my typical day. And then I move to the office where I met my team, and after a coffee together, we get to work for what we could call that 9-18 day, even though we usually go a bit longer as a consultancy word for usually.
You're making up for that fame that consultancy has, right?
Yeah, unlikely, yes. And working in the world of training, and I think it is the real difference with classic business consulting. We have projects that leave more space for creativity, both in terms of topics, but above all in terms of, let's say, methodologies. And it's thanks to this space for creativity that I discovered the fantastic world of gamification applied to business context, because that's what I manage every day. That's what I am talking about, gamification applied to business context. And then in the end, when I get home, I always try to find an hour or two to devote to my passion, which is, of course, video games.
Amazing. So, Gianni, we want to jump right in and know of one of those times where you had what we like to call a favorite fail or a first attempt in learning. One of those times when, things just didn't go right. We want to be there with you and maybe see how you got out of it, what you learned, or, how it ended after that fail and what did you do to maybe turn it around, whatever you want to go for.
Yeah, I will go for my favorite failure that is, let's say, a high-level failure. Because in my job, I have to keep the focus on the goal of the training path or program. As I said at the beginning, I work in a training company, so I always have training objectives for the participants. So if we exclude the issue of the budget needed for the gamification development, you know that game-based solutions have a huge number of potentials and features. And choosing the ones needed to achieve the goal without adding special effects is critical, is crucial. It's the key to success in the training world, because player needs to be engaged, learning while having fun, but they should not be distracted by buttons or filters or lights that are not useful for their gamification experience. And That happens, especially in my early gamification projects, because I made these kind of mistakes. I aim more at surprising the player, but at the expense of clarity and simplicity, which is often an added value in gaming and in real life too.
So, Johnny, can you sort of maybe go to one of those times and maybe in your early days, like what happened? We want to sort of, we don't have to name any names or companies or specific projects or anything, but we want to sort of feel that experience with you so that we can take away some of the, sometimes the pain in that sense. And that's what brings as well the learning for the audience.
Yeah, so you want some practical example more in
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah.
Well, it was my first project in this company, and I put some additional function into the gamification platform. That is not only the ranking, not only the scoring system, but I put some alerts, and the alerts is related to appears to the player when they didn't come to play for a long time. So every time that players did enjoy the platform for a long time, they receive a push, a pop-up in their desktop that reminds to play the gamification. And this kind of features was considered too invasive. I mean that they are not really appreciated by participants. And in the overall project evaluation, these functionalities was considered a bad indicators of the project. That's in
Huh.
practice an example of what I tried to explain before, because we need to players and to be engaged, to engage players, and they have to learn while having fun, but they should not be distracted by buttons or functionality that is not in line with the training and with the educational goal. I don't know if it's clear right now, Rob. What do you think?
I think in general, from what you're saying is, and this is something that I've definitely seen before, and it's easy to get in that when you mention like, oh, we're gonna do some interaction, some gamification, some of these things, people get like super excited and want to bring in, oh, I played this game the other day and I want to bring this in. And it's easy to forget that you have a specific objective that you want to achieve, right? And if you're not building somehow, again, it doesn't have to be like super straight, exactly, building the objective every single micro interaction. But everything that you're doing has somehow to be building, even if something that, in the end builds towards, like it could be like several levels. Like, oh, I'm building to this, that builds towards this other thing, that builds towards this other thing that is my objective in the end. But you somehow have to be able to see that horizon of, this action is leading to something that helps me achieve the final objective or objectives. And it's easy to lose sight of that because you're excited. Projects can be a lot of fun. The client can get excited as well and see fun things around. And, gamification is not about necessarily making things fun. It's about making them engaging so that people actually achieve whatever objectives you're facing, right? In your case, it's training, so it's learning objectives. And you want to make sure you achieve those, but it's easy to lose sight of that, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. In your words, but this is exactly my reality, because I have always a training goal to be achieved, and I have to be simple, and I have to design a clear path to achieve this training goal through the gamification. Plus, we have to consider that the target population of this program, so the players of the gamification, usually are not so young. Here in Italy, I work basically in the banking sector. So that means that my target population for my project are banking employee. That
Hmm.
means that they are not so young, and they are not, let's say, friendly with the digital dynamics, with the gaming dynamics. So these are elements that I cannot forget while I am designing a project like with the gamification.
Amazing. So, Gianni, let's actually turn that around and go for another experience where things actually did go well. It could be one of those proud moments that you say, oh, we managed to do this. And we want to, again, be there in that story with you, take away some of those lessons, some of those things that you did that you would say, also, these are some of the success factors, perhaps, that helped us get to this level of success in this project.
Yes, I would like to say that one of the biggest challenge in designing this kind of project is to match the client needs with the gamification features. I mean, if you heard my clients, they want to create every time a video game from scratch, a very complex video game from scratch, but they don't consider exactly the goal, because in explaining what they desire, they are not considered. They forget that the goal, the training goal. So my biggest success is ever when I let's say, when I make my clients understand what is the aim of the gamification, what is the real aim of the gamification, and that is not just having fun. That every features of the gamification is related to a particular path, to a particular dynamics that help us to achieve our training goal. So my eureka moment is when finally I make understand my clients that this is the right way to use the gamification by doing in this way and not in the other way, maintain a simplicity and stay focused on the training goal.
Again, I'm gonna pinch you like last time. Is there, maybe one time that you remember? Again, you can name the specifics if you want. If you don't need to name, again, names of companies or the specific training. But we want to sort of have the feet on the ground and say, this was happening. So, I told them this, they said that. Like we want to be there and understand what does that look like in a real life situation.
Yes. For example, in developing a game-based solution, the scoring system, and this is an experience from a real day of my professional career. The definition of a scoring system is a very complex because you have to consider a lot of elements. For example, the number of quizzes, the number of game level, the number of participants, and of course, on the other hand, the number of prizes, for example, available to be purchased by participants. So, in preparing and in defining all this system, I'm a consultant basically. So I work on the Excel file, and if I could show you this file, you say you are mad because we are talking about a file with thousand and thousand of line with numbers, so with possibility, with percentage, and so on. And you asked me to provide to you an example, and this is a very, very, very eureka moment for me, a very successful moment for me, because we were talking about a project that involved more than 1,000 people around the world, because 5 different countries were involved in this project. Each country has different budget, each country has different number of participants, different number of quizzes. So basically, we develop on the same platform 5 different scoring systems that need to be managed centrally by our client and by my team.
Amazing. So you've had plenty of experience. We've gone through the early days when things didn't go right, and some of the good examples of things that you've done that have actually gone well. Do you have, like, when a project comes up, we're talking about gamification and training and learning in general, how do you do it? Like, do you have a process? Do you follow a series of steps? Like, if a project comes in the door, like right now, what are the things that you would be doing right after that?
Yeah, I usually follow a very structured approach that comes from the consultancy world, let's say. And it starts with gathering the client's needs and wants. This is the first step. And then there is a step of interpreting these needs that is necessary, because what the customer thinks they need does not always match the reality. And to explain this concept, there is a beautiful quote by Henry Ford that say, if I asked people what they wanted, them they would have said faster horses, but Ford built the first car. So this is the concept, because not always the clients knows what they really need. So the customer thinks that they need something, but then you as a consultant has to explain, has to interpret their words, the situation, and define what is the real needs that are not
Gotcha.
faster horses, but a car, Then I have to match these elements, so the client's needs, with the gamification solution that we are able to offer to our partnership with Game for Business. And this platform is something really innovative, flexible, and customizable, of course. And frankly speaking, in Italy, I have not been able to find partners that can offer something like this. That is why we rely on Game for Business. In particular,
Amazing.
yeah, you interviewed Peter, that is one of Game for Business employee in a previous
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah, exactly.
Peter Filek, and it's interesting that you mentioned this, because one of the things that we get requested every now and then from the audience is, oh, can you interview a client or somebody who has worked with the person that you're mentioning today? So Engagers, this is kind of one of those days. Like, you have Gianni today, who is a client of Games for Business from Peter Filak. So, he's also a gamification consultant. So it's not exactly just an end client in that sense. But, it is an example of somebody who is consuming that content. So there you go. You take it away, Gianni. It's all yours.
Exactly. Then, when I match the client's needs with the gamification solution, I have gamification fine tuning, let's say, carry out in direct collaboration with clients until they roll out to the entire target population of the initiative, of the training program. Last but certainly not least is the whole monitoring phase. And I would like to stress this step, Rob, because the world of training is perhaps one in which it was almost impossible until now to measure the results of a program, to measure the famous return on investment. For example,
Yeah.
it was difficult to understand how much a training course had actually affected the performances of a company. That's the point. And I think that thanks to gamification and in general to the characteristic of digital solution, it is now possible to link concrete KPIs, that means key performance indicators of the business, to the various training topics. That is a very important step in the training world. And in my dream, so what I imagine for the future, I think it will be soon possible to apply, for example, the big data methods also in the training field. Because thanks to the digital transformation, all the new technologies, we are collecting right now a lot of information related to the training world.
That is definitely true.
Yeah,
Gathering more data than ever.
yeah, exactly. And gamification will play a crucial role in analyzing this kind of information.
Amazing. Amazing. So that is your process, definitely understanding the client's needs, then interpreting the client's needs as well. Then you go ahead and you put it into the platform that you guys are using. And then, of course, there's a monitoring stage. What do you do with the results of this monitoring? Do you have something specific or it depends on the case?
It depends on the case, because I just explained a very high level process, but then
Of course.
we have to consider case by case according to the budget, of course, because if clients request a video game from scratch, okay, it's possible to develop a video game, but there is a budget to set in this case. As you,
Clients can easily forget that part.
yeah, easily.
Budget and time.
Yeah, I would say that jump this part of, of the discussion. And on the other hand, and this is very important also to be clear and to make clear that it's not necessary to be a millionaire or to have a thousand euros to develop a gamification solution. Frankly speaking, there are lots of solution, a very good solution already available with less money, more or less money. And I think that in particular here in Italy, let's say gamification revolution, it's not so strong yet. I believe in gamification and in the power of gamification, in the power of gaming for the training world. This is my let's say my field. But right now in Italy, people, companies doesn't discover yet the potentiality of this methodology.
That is true. And I'm pretty sure that is not only for Italy, that happens in many, many parts of the world. For sure. For sure. And even in the ones where they're kind of excited in general, and you find people who are excited, there's plenty of people who are not excited about it, who don't realize the potential there. And it is, it's one of the things that we aim for by having this podcast. So thank you, Gianni, for sharing those words. Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification. And Gianni, what would you say with all this experience that you've had? You have a process. We've been through many things on the interview already, but is there some sort of best practice that you can name, something that, in general helps improve your gamification projects or makes them at least a little bit better?
Well, my suggestion that is also a best practice is start from the product. I mean, you have in your solution, portfolio of solution, different platform maybe of gamification, each platform with specific features, with specific elements and so on. You have to match, and the best practice focus on the matching you have to match these elements, these values of each solution that you have in your portfolio with the client needs. So from the client side, you need to be able to understand, before I said interpret the needs of the client. On the other hand, you have always to remember the features of the platform that you have. So this is my, let's say, best practice, because I start always from these two elements, and my job is basically to match these two elements, these two sides of the same medal.
Hmm. There you go. Great stuff. So for the engagers, that have been listening to you up till now, you probably you mentioned that we have a bunch of episodes already. Are these questions, are these recommendations, this sort of innovation vibe and ideas that are launched here in the podcast? When you hear these things and we hear these questions, does somebody come to your mind and you say, "Oh, I'd really like to hear this or that person answering these questions or being on a podcast like Professor Game"?
You mean to be an interviewer?
Like a featured guest that could be
Yeah,
like just like
yeah,
Peter
yeah,
Filak said, "Oh, Gianni Minetti would be an amazing person that we would like to
yeah.
interview." Is there somebody that comes to your mind?
Yes, I have a friend of mine that comes from Sicily, that is Calogero Michike, aka Giro. You know, in Italy we use a lot of nickname. And actually, he's the development director of Electronic Arts. I don't know if you know this game industry, and I don't know if you ever played to FIFA, for example, FIFA the software.
Yeah,
Do you remember the jingle at the beginning of the game? EA Sports. Do you remember?
it's in
And
the
this is,
game.
yeah, exactly, Rob. And this is the Electronic Arts game. And Giro is the development director of this company. So I would like to suggest this let's say, guest star for one of your next episode.
Amazing. If you can make any introductions, I'm sure we can make that happen.
Of course, of course.
And Gianni, keeping that recommendation vibe, and again, thinking of the audience that we have here, people who are interested in using games for something that goes beyond entertainment or gamification and these things. Is there any book that you would recommend, again, for direct inspiration on gamification or something that could be lateral as well, like whatever you want to go for? Would you recommend any book? And of course, tell us why.
Yes, I think that related to gamification, in the last years, a lot of books were written, but I will suggest to the engagers, in particular, two books. The one is Gamify: How Gamification Motivates People to Do Extraordinary Things. I think it's by Byron Burke. I'm not sure about the author, but the title is the correct one. So if you want, I can repeat: Gamify: How Gamification Motivates People to Do Extraordinary Things. And I have another one title, if I can. If I remember, was Gamification Using Game Elements in Serious Context. And I will recommend these two books to the engagers.
Amazing. Sounds like a couple of very good recommendations for sure. Brian Burke, I think, is very well known. This book has been around for quite a while, definitely, and has inspired plenty of people. So, engagers, if you haven't read it yet, it's probably a good idea to engage with that book. And the other one, I'm not sure if I've heard it or read it before. I'll have to look into it and find out and let you know as well. I'm sure it's a great recommendation, but if I manage to read it as well. And going beyond things that you recommend from other people, like other guests and books written by other people, what would you say is your superpower in gamification? That thing that you do at least better than most other people, Gianni?
Yeah, in my job, I think that the core skill, the core competence is the negotiation. So I would say that my superpower in delivering my project and my program is the ability to think big but remain focused in the small. Thinking big because with digital technologies, we are able to create anything, and stay focused on small because in designing a game-based solution, I think it's crucial, it's critical to always put yourself in the shoes of the player. So you always think big but considering the small. This is my superpower, and this is my aim in designing my project.
Sounds amazing, Gianni. Thank you so much for that. And we arrived to this question, and after hearing you mention several times you're a fan of video games, you love to play video games, recommending somebody from the video game industry, this might come in as a difficult one as well, which is, what would you say is your favorite game, Gianni?
Well, I was born and grew up with console video games, such as Nintendo and then, of course, PlayStation. And as you told at the beginning of this episode, I love role playing games, and my favorite sagas are Kingdom Hearts, Assassin's Creed, and of course, Final Fantasy. These are the three titles that I would like to suggest to everyone.
I'm going to put your hand to the fire for a second. I want to ask you to get yourself into the ring and say, those are three sagas. Which one is the one that you would say, this is my absolute favorite right now? Right now, it could be nowadays, in the olden days, whatever you want to go for.
Yeah, it's an easy question for me because I would say Final Fantasy Saga. And
There you go.
I don't know. I don't know if you are a fan of PlayStation, but I was finally able to buy the PS5. Here in Italy is a very mission impossible, but I think all over the world. And in the store of the PS5, you can collect, you can buy, of course, oldest episode of the saga, and it's great. As a gamer, I love this moment of the history where you can live again stories of the past. Wow, it's fantastic.
Those are definitely fantastic sagas. I have to confess, I'm not a huge fan of that saga. I started actually playing most of what I played after, it became very famous, and I started playing it in old consoles like Nintendo and Super Nintendo, where it was, it's like super, super basic. I know when it got to PlayStation, it became a lot more sophisticated and it had more graphics and a lot of sort of combinations of things and touching like 45 buttons and managing to do amazing things with that. I have a friend who was a big fan back in the day when we were at school, but I was never, my abilities were not pressing the right buttons at the right time.
Well, Rob, I started with the Super Nintendo too, and I was a very big fan of Street Fighter and Donkey Kong. I can't remember the title, but this was very, very beautiful game.
Yeah, I enjoy many of them. Like all I'm saying is I'm not. If back in our days, so to speak, there was this esports thing, people might think like, oh, these guys would probably be esports athletes, right? I would definitely not have. I've never been like a super extra talented gamer. I've just been a person who enjoys them very much, and at this point, hopefully, is able to use them for something beyond my own personal entertainment.
Yeah,
But yeah, those are amazing games. I to be honest, I don't know if I found games that I not enjoy once I start playing them.
and that's enough. I think that's all. Nothing
That's it.
to add. You
That's
enjoy
it.
the game exactly.
So, Gianni, we always like to have a random, when we can and when time permits, right, have a random question from the audience. And this time we're getting one that says, why should we be interested in fun and games in learning? So, what do you think?
Well, interesting question. I would like to reply to this engager with this explanation. I mean, game has always played a fundamental role in the life of every human being because, for example, it's through playing that we discover the world as children. Okay, but what happens once the child grow up? It's a common idea that a child has the right to play in order to understand the world, while on the other hand, an adult should not waste time on such impractical activities, right? But the reality tells us a different story because play grows and changes in step by step with human development and remains a constant at every stage of life. If you learn staying on a book, reading and repeating, okay, maybe you will learn something and you will record this information in your brain. But if you try to understand, to learn something by playing this concept, by having fun during the learning process, these informations will stay with you for a longer time. And this is proved scientifically. There are a lot of psychological research that demonstrate this affirmation.
That sounds great. And there's definitely a lot of science behind that affirmation, as you were just saying. But Johnny, we're running out of time now, and it is time for you to let us know if you have any sort of final piece of advice, whatever you want to go for, any final words. Let us know where we can find about more about you and your work, where we can find you perhaps in the world of the internet, and then we'll say that it's done. We're done for today.
Yeah, I will suggest just one, I think, two words that are be curious. And remember that gaming is a part of our daily life. And this means that there will always be a way to develop a game-based solution that can handle or solve any kind of situation. And this is my suggestion. Regarding my contacts, I will gladly leave you my email. That is gianni.minetti@hotmail.it. And you can add my LinkedIn profile by simply typing my name in the search bar.
Sounds fantastic. Thanks a lot once again for sharing all of your knowledge, your understanding, your experience with the engagers, for those final words as well, for the answer to a random question that we got from the audience. However, Gianni, engagers, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Hey, engagers, thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast, and I hope you enjoyed this interview with Gianni. Do you have any questions like the one that we made on this episode that you would like to have future guests answering? Then you have a very easy and quick task that you can do. You can go to professorgame.com/question and ask your question. If it is selected, it'll come up in a future episode and you will get your answer. And remember, before you go on to your next mission, remember to follow or subscribe for free using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.